talk about dividing and composing functions. So in a previous video, I already went over adding, subtracting, and multiplying functions. If you're not familiar with that, I recommend you watch those first. Those will be a good way to gear up for learning division and composition of functions. Let's get started. So, when dividing functions, we say that f over g of x is equal to f of x over g of x. So if you're asked to compute f over g of x, all you do is take your f of x, turn it into your numerator, and take your g of x and make it your denominator. Notice here all I've done is rewritten f of x as my numerator and rewritten g of x as my denominator. So what do I do from here? That's great, but once you set up the problem, you need to simplify. Remember, we simplify by factoring. So in this case, I factored a 2 out of everything. I've taken a 2 out of the denominator, a 2 out of the numerator. I've further factored this quadratic piece, and now I will cancel out terms that exist in the numerator and denominator. So I cancel out the 2's, I cancel out x minus 1, and I'm left with x plus 3. So f of x over g of x turned out to just be equal to x plus 3. Again, I found that by taking each function. Each one became a numerator or denominator. So since it was f over g, I put f of x as numerator, g of x as denominator. And then I just factored. So I chose to factor out the 2's that way. You didn't have to do it that way. I found that to be easier. And then just as before, when simplifying rational expressions, I factored. I got rid of terms that exist in the numerator and denominator, simplifying to get x plus 3. So really, the only new skill that we're learning here is just how to set up the problem. The rest we practiced in Unit 2. So for example, in this case, I'm asked to find f over g of x, which is equal to f of x over g of x. So I take f of x, I make it my numerator, I take g of x, I make it my denominator. Now, that's great, but I need to simplify. So let's try factoring. It looks to me that the denominator is already factored, right? X minus 12 can't be factored any further, but I can factor the numerator. So I always set up the skeleton first, so I do my parentheses, I put my x's in place. It looks like this is end up being, let's see, a 12 and a 4, so 12 times 4 is 48. If I make the 12 negative, 4 times negative 12 is negative 48, and negative 12 plus 4 is negative 8. So now I've factored my expression. I cancel out x minus 12 of the numerator and denominator, and I'm left with x plus 4. So this is pretty straightforward. Again, this is a skill going from this point on. This is all stuff we've practiced before. It's just a matter of getting from here to here and understanding how to set up the problem. It's the only new part of this a skill. So let's practice again. So let's say again we're asked to find f of x over g of x. So I make f of x my numerator, I make g of x my denominator, and now I simplify. So notice that I can factor an x out of everything, right? If I take an x out of the numerator, I get 3x plus 2 over x. So I cancel out that x, and I get my answer 3x plus 2. Now, the case won't always be that f is the numerator and g is the denominator. So they could have asked us to find g of x over f of x, and we would have been able to do that too. We would have just written g of x as the numerator and f of x as the denominator. So pay attention to those, because that's a common mistake I see. Students always assume that f goes first and g goes second. Not always the case. So if I wanted to compute g of x over f of x, I would have taken the same approach. I still would have factored out my x, canceled it out, and my answer would have been 1 over 3x plus 2. So again, pay attention to whether g or f is the numerator or denominator. The big thing is just setting up the problem. The execution of it is something we've practiced before. If you don't feel comfortable, all these parts and where I factor and simplify and stuff like that, go visit my video. I have, I think, 2 or 3 videos on simplifying rational functions. So So go check those out. Let's talk about composition. So this is a brand new idea. So let's devote a little bit of time to that. So when we compose a function, let's read the definition. A function whose values are found from two given functions. So a composed function is a function whose values are found from two given functions by applying one function to an independent variable and applying the second function to the result. So we're going to apply a function to an independent variable, and that's going to equal something, and then we're going to apply that to a second function. So I'll have my function A, apply it to my independent variable, that'll give me something, and I'm going to apply that to function B. I'll say that one more time. I'll have a function, I'll apply it to an independent variable, that'll give me some answer, I'll apply that answer to function B. So, if you look at the example that I've already illustrated for us below, I have f of x equals 2 minus x squared, I have g of x equals 3x plus 10, and I have x equals 2. So say you were asked to find g of f of 2. What does that mean? Well, it means you start by finding f of 2, which is something we all know how to do, right? You just plug in 2 where there is normally an x. So to find f of 2, I set x equal to 2 and I evaluate. So I've taken 2 minus x squared and I've plugged in 2 where there was an x and I've evaluated, and I got negative 2. So this is that part where we took a function, f of x, we applied it to an independent variable, which was 2, and we got our result, which is negative 2. So we've taken care of f of 2. So now we have g of f of 2 equals g of negative 2. And I'm allowed to say that because f of 2 is actually equal to negative 2. So this is saying the same thing. So now I'm going to evaluate g of negative 2. I do that by taking negative 2 and replacing x with negative 2 anywhere there's an x in g of x. So g of x equals 3x plus 10. So I sub out x for negative 2, and then I evaluate. And my answer was 4. So g of f of 2 is equal to g of negative 2, and g of negative 2 is equal to 4. Okay, let's keep practicing that. So you won't always be asked to do a problem that has that many steps. So in some cases, in this case, you see that you're just asked to find f of g of x. F of g of x. That means we're going to put g of x in place of x in f of x. So if I have f of x equals x plus 1, I'm going to put g of x in place of x in this function. So g of x equals x squared. So I'm going to rewrite f of x, so f of x equals, and instead of this x, I'll write g of x. Now, since g of x, I can't really do anything with that, but I know that g of x is equal to x squared, so I'm going to sub out g of x for x squared. So f of x is now equal to x squared plus 1, so really this is f of g of x equals x squared plus 1. I took g of x and I put it in place of x anywhere there was an x in f of x. It's the same concept when we find f of 2 or f of 3 or whatever. We know that that just means evaluate the function for that number. We're doing the same thing here. Instead of replacing it with a constant, we're replacing it with an entire function. Let's practice again. So we're asked to find g of f of x. That means we're going to put f of x in place of x in g of x. We're going to take g of x, which is, let's write it down in blue here, g of x equals 3x minus 2. So to find g of f of x, I replace this x with f of x. Okay? G of f of x is equal to g of x, and then I take the x's and replace them with f of x. So I've got 3 times f of x minus 2, which is equal to 3 of f of x equals 10x, so 3 times 10x minus 2. 3 times 10x is 30x minus 2. So g of f of x equals 30x minus 2. Let's practice again. So g of f of x once more. So what does that mean? That means that we are going to take f of x and it replaces x in g of x. So the thing inside stands in for x in the thing outside. So I know that g of x equals x squared minus 2x. That means I'm going to take f of x. This is going to become f of x, and that x is going to become f of x. So g of f of x equals f of x squared minus 2 times f of x. And now I can write in my function. So g of f of x equals, I'll write in 5x plus 7 squared minus 2 times 5x plus 7. Now I simplify, and I take, let's see, I need to take 5x plus 7 and square it. So that would be what? You can do this one of two ways. You can use the squaring formula if you know it, or you can also do this by just writing 5x plus 7 side by side, right, and then foiling it. So that would be 25x squared plus 35x plus 35x, which is 70x, plus 49. Okay, so g of f of x equals 25x squared plus 70x plus 49 minus 2 times 5x is negative 10x, 2 times positive 7x, we get negative 14. And then I would finish up by simplifying. So finally, I don't know if we can see this so much, g of f of x equals 25x squared, that's that term. I've got plus 70 minus 10, so plus 60x plus 49 minus 14 would be plus 35. Okay, so I know it got a little hairy in here when I did the squaring and the simplifying, but if you can get to this point in red, where you've set up the equation, you've done the substitution correctly, you should be golden from there. Let's practice again. So this time notice that I'm given f of x, g of x, and x. And this should say, I think what I meant to say was f of g of 1. So I'm given this independent variable, I'm given f of x, I'm given g of x, and I'm asked to find f of g of 1. So what does that mean? That means 1 replaces x in g of x, and g of 1 replaces x in f of x. So let's do that one at a time. So g of x equals x squared. G of 1 is just equal to 1 squared, which is equal to 1. So g of 1 equals 1. So if I want to find f of g of 1, which is the same thing as f of 1, because g of 1 equals 1, f of 1, then I just take f of x, which is f of g of 1, which equals f of 1. I take f, and then I sub in g of 1, which is equal to 1, anywhere I see an x. So f of g of 1 equals 2 times 2 minus 6 equals negative 4. F of g of 1 equals negative 4. So first, I just worked my way from outside in. So I took 1, I replaced x with 1 in g of x to get g of 1. Then I took g of 1 and replaced x with g of 1 in f of x. So hopefully by now you're starting to get the hang of it. If you need further practice, there's a lot of it in your workbooks. Again, remember, I like writing out these sentences at the beginning so I kind of know where I'm going. So remember, you always start with the outside in. So I started with the 1, got g of 1, then got f of g of 1, right? So work from the outside in. I recommend writing out these little sentences at the beginning, and then just be careful as you go along. So the hardest part is just setting up the equation correctly. So knowing, like getting to this point is the tough part. Actually doing the solution at the end is pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.